A full review of the Jaguar E-PACE, the new small SUV, is today on Autogefühl, your #1 resource for in-depth car reviews and your #1 community to discuss cars with Thomas. Rainy weather here today in beautiful southern France, but surely with a beautiful car, an exterior, interior and the driving experience with the top 300 horsepower petrol engine in full HD, full screen and full length. Let's go! So a small Jaguar, a real one, is joining us. Oh, look at that sweetie. Isn't she cute? Yeah, meow. And this one is the car cat then, looking at the front. Really beautiful from the design, almost as beautiful as the real cat is, with the huge front grille here in black, this S trim. Also LED headlights from Stellar Equipment. I really like that they did that. The front hood is split here a little bit, little power dome on the front part, and it really looks powerful in the front. And she obviously likes it too. What about you? A little bit different than with the F-PACE, the bigger SUV brother. More horizontally drawn lights there. Here a little bit more, a little bit more vertical. But definitely likable for humans and cats, it seems. 4.40 meters or 14'4" is the total length, so definitely way shorter than the Jaguar F-PACE, and competing in this segment where that's the keyless entry function where it automatically closes. When you're close to the door handles, as soon as you put your hand here, then it opens again, also opens here the side mirrors. Well, this segment here really surging, especially the smaller SUVs, the fastest growing segment worldwide for all vehicles. It starts with 17-inch rims. Those ones here optional 20-inch, really huge already, and 21 would be actually the maximum one. HSE, the top trim, you will also soon see in the interior, but you can also go then with lower trim versions. By the way, it's not called S, it's called R-Dynamic here, so to correct me from the earlier. So this R-Dynamic design on the exterior, we also have it on the interior. Interesting that we also still have this, contrast here with plastic, so you still got the somewhat crossover look, and then again, that's really too funny, with a matte gray paint here, and then what I said earlier, just few design lines here, keeping it simplistic and coupe style ending right there to give you this harmony and elegance from Jaguar sedans, also with the SUVs, and I think that is really well done. So P300 AWD is the all-wheel drive version. P300, the biggest petrol engine. You already see the badge here in the rear. It's the only Jaguar with a transverse mount engine like this, not longitudinal. We'll soon take a look at the engines. And this one here also on the platform, actually built by Magna Steyr in Austria. Same platform than the Range Rover Evoque, the Land Rover Discovery Sport, or formerly also the Freelander. So a steel chassis. So not that newest chassis form. I'm basically a fan of steel chassis a little bit because aluminum takes more energy to produce and it's not always better. It's lighter, yes, but steel has a lot of advantages actually. But the platform itself is still quite old, but you do not see that on the exterior, because the exterior here with those horizontally drawn tail lights and the beautiful sporty looks here, that one is really up to date and modern. And modern is also to use fake exhaust pipes, because the outer lip is fake, the inner one you can just see when you look inside there. But everything else around it, I think, is just on top point with the design. So engines, well, we all have 2-liter 4-cylinder engines, the Jaguar Ingenium engines, 150, 180 or 240 horsepower for the diesels. This one here, the petrol engine, either available with 250 or the top trim today with 300 horsepower. You see here only the transverse mounted engines, so like this. Longitudinal would be like this, like in the bigger Jaguar models. This again because it is this Evoque or Discovery Sport platform. The advantage is that actually you will have more space on the interior for that, because you can make this part here in the front shorter, and of course the car itself on the exterior will be shorter. That's the good thing about it, but you cannot mount any V6 in that one there. That's of course the disadvantage. And front-wheel drive is available with the entry-level diesel engine, all other than all-wheel drive, but the basic system of the all-wheel drive is front plus rear on demand. And it's interesting also here the new 9-speed automatic gearbox. That is one thing I can already tell you, really shifting very smoothly through the gears. I really like that, more than when we drive the vehicle very soon. This is the key, very unusual from what we know from Jaguar, but it is really something new. A little bit squarish, I think. Doesn't fit the elegance of the car. Then this one here, this R trim, R-Dynamic trim, with the red seats, I don't know. Better go for the base seats, because at least in Germany, some European markets, not sure how it is yet in the US, you get fabric seats in base and also in middle trim levels. I would recommend those, because the all animal skin seats are, material choice that way, not that good in quality either. And I mean, even in this color, I don't know. Also the inside of the doors. This, you got a little bit ambient light here, that is nicely done, and also materials are quite soft. I think that should be leatherette here, so, or wet of course today, but that is soft, and you don't have this shiny black plastic elements. I think I do like that. When we get inside here, you sit quite well. I'm 1.86 m or 6'1", and although we have the panoramic roof, we have a lot of headroom left. The steering column here can be manually adjusted like this. It feels a little bit weird, also sounds like it, but the important thing is it does the job. You can really adjust it very well in all of the different ways. You do not see any instruments yet because they're all digital. Here we also have the electronically mounted seats, but you have to turn on the ignition for that, not exactly the engine, but at least the ignition, that you can change them around. Then you can put them really in any ways. One thing I know from the Evoque already is that you hardly have any left for your feet. So especially in the low area here, when you're driving, this part here where you rest your left foot with the automatic gearbox is really short and doesn't give you so much room in the lower foot area. Other than that, you have the upright SUV seating position, and that's of course quite comfortable. And the animal skin surface is extremely firm. So for the best comfort, I really would go for the fabric seats, because they give you more softness also in the riding then. Interior overview, a very sporty one, inspired by the Jaguar F-Type, here also with this panic handle for the co-driver. And this also marks the visual split, also with the same driving stick here with the Jaguar F-Type. And now they use soft touch materials right there, and no shiny black elements right here. I like it when we have the matte stuff. Also the temperature turning knobs here with a big display, easy to use, still separated one. You can easily access them while driving. Also the F-type steering wheel, quite compact here, also racy style, but the buttons here on the steering wheel, I have been criticizing them quite often also in the F-type. They should be better if Jaguar wants to keep up a good build quality. The optional 10-inch screen, soon more details to that, the biggest one that is available. You can control everything else there, and also soon leads to the digital instruments and the head-up display. The all-digital instruments are clear to read. Oh, and after the engine part I obviously didn't close the hood properly, I have to recheck that, but good that I get the information there. Left side then speed, right side the RPM, and whoa, you can already see something of that quite high consumption. And the head-up display, it is not flickering in real life, pretty good display, actually quite large also from the numbers. I think it's a good addition that keeps up the safety when you have your view just in the front, even though it's quite foggy and rainy at the moment. And the frameless rear mirror, that's also a nice but simple, elegant element. This is the infotainment system. You see it's now quite responsive. They've worked on that. I like that. Also zoom in and out like with a smartphone. The direction, how you should and where you should go could be a little bit clearer, but after all, it's quite okay. Also the camera system right here, this is the fake drone view from above, but you can also switch it to closer looks. Now a little bit blurry because of the rain outside. That's also the disadvantage there. Phone connecting either via Bluetooth. The other thing is they do not support like CarPlay and Android Auto yet. You have to use those in-control apps. That's a little bit annoying, so I would just use it with Bluetooth. This main menu here from the software is you know, a little bit slow and doesn't give you the best overview, so I think they should work a little bit more on the software. Seat heating has also to be controlled right here, or with the hotkey then in the lower part, but you cannot press one button, then have to access it right here. You have to turn on the engine for that. 3-level heating, or in this case also cooling. But if you go with the fabric seats, you won't even need the cooling, maybe not even the heating, just if you're really a fan of it. But there's one secret how to access the seat controls easier. You press the climate button and then you can do it like this for coldness or warmth. That's actually a good solution. So in the lower middle console, there's a 12-volt power supply in the front, and for example, you can put your smartphone here, but it doesn't make too much sense if you want to charge it. Then the shifting stick, put it leftward to the sport mode. I will explain that when we drive the car. Those are the driving modes for dynamic or snow mode, but they don't make so much difference than the changing of the shifting characteristics. Then 2 adaptive cup holders. The right one is also a little bit bigger. That's nicely done. And then this armrest, quite fixedly attached, and below that you then have 2 USB ports, and you can, for example, put your smartphone in there, or you know, there's actually quite a lot of room there, and again an advantage of this platform they're using. Why is it so dark here? Because I've closed the panoramic roof. I can open this shade. This one is there when we have a lot of sun, and the interesting thing is really, well, why don't we lose some headroom? Because it is really just this panoramic roof that you cannot open. Well, the disadvantage is that you cannot open it, but the advantage is then that you don't lose any headroom, because those roofs you can open, they need to go somewhere, and then usually you lose like this of headroom. So it has pros and cons. Which panoramic roof do you prefer? One you can open, or one that is like this? This is very exciting now. How much room will we still have in the rear? Well, it's a little bit cramped from the entry. It's also not a long vehicle, but it does still fit for tall drivers. The front foot part is raising a little bit. That's a little bit weird, but knee-wise, it's still fitting for tall people. Also headroom-wise, although we have this panoramic roof, and there isn't so much more room in the F-PACE, and that is the thing. Due to this platform with the front wheel engines, just a front wheel drive platform basically, and the transverse mount engines, you really have more room in the interior. However, other competitors in this segment offer more space in the interior, and I wouldn't exactly describe it as the best seating position in the rear, but it's actually quite okay. The front driver should be a little bit smaller than that would, help things at least. Isofix on the outside seats and then the middle armrest. Here with some storage room and also adaptive cup holders. That should keep things fixed and tight even if children are playing. And wow, we have 3 USB slots in the rear. That's good for charging stuff when everyone is using smartphones in the rear. And optional luxury feature also with heated seats for the rear parts. Now to the trunk. Electric hatch. You can open it right there below the beautiful Jaguar logo. 560 liters, and we've left the luggage here that you can see how big it really is. This small cover is sometimes a little bit annoying, also a little cheap build quality there. There's a replacement tire below that one here. Some really appreciate having that. It's not the squarest dimension in this area. Maximum 1,200 liters. Then if you flip the seats, you have to go around for that and then flip the seats like this. It's a 2/3, 1/3 split. There you go, how you can load things through. It raises a little bit, could be a little bit flatter if you remove the head restraints. I think it could be a little bit more square in dimensions trunk wise. And of course, child safety test. Let's see. Oh, it even gives me a horn. That's the ultimate child safety, that you actually know, hey, in the moment your child is not getting decapitated, but better get to the vehicle now. We start with the acceleration. It was 100. So you see this 300 horsepower small 2-liter 4-cylinder engine is actually quite powerful and doesn't sound too bad when you really push it, or what do you think? And it was also wet condition, and this all-wheel drive managed to keep us with a very good traction actually, so that was quite pleasing indeed. Or what do you think? So always of course a little bit different what you hear on camera. Now, see everything also in the head-up display is a pretty clear display, also pretty big actually from the numbers. So it's clear to read, but doesn't look that elegant. But you can argue for that it's better than it's clear to read. Now it's also getting even rainier, so we can also check out some other features. For example, I was in the sport mode, putting the shifting stick left. Now I'm back to the D mode. That is then shifting up again earlier or shifting down again a little bit later. Sport mode then is to stress the RPMs a little bit more. And there's also the dynamic mode, which is setting all parameters on a sporty one. But usually you can just keep it in the comfort mode. You'll be fine anyway. Steering wise, it's changing a little bit that you have a little bit more resistance, for example, in the dynamic mode at the steering wheel. Now in the comfort mode, I can also set the adaptive cruise control, keeping the distance to the cars in front of me. So far it's doing a good job. And although we have some adverse weather conditions here, it's not too loud in the interior, so that's I think one of the good things. 114 kilometers an hour I'm driving now. I don't have to raise my voice that much. I like that. That's really, really good. You also have this upright seating position, which keeps you quite comfortable in the car. That's good. However, when driving, what I mentioned earlier in the interior part, same with the Evoque, not so much room for your feet down there. So you have to bear that in mind. Visibility, well, to the rear you have this really flat rear window. Still, it gives you better visibility to the rear than you would expect from the exterior. Also to the sides, it's still quite okay. The B-pillar is a little thick, but other than that, still quite okay. The interior really comes a lot towards you. That makes a little bulky feeling, but of course the car feels sportier than the F-Pace. The F-Pace is light due to the aluminum chassis, this one here with the older steel chassis. However, this car is shorter, therefore It's not the weight issue, it's just shorter, therefore it feels more agile. And of course, it's an advantage when you drive it in the city, that you just get along the corners better and you don't, have so much width and also length carrying around. That would be also one of the main advantages while driving, that you just feel less stressed, especially when you're driving in the city, because you have a smaller car. That would be also the main argument for the E-PACE if you compare it to the F-PACE. And again, for all the German viewers, you have to think about E-PACE, I-PACE. This one here with the E, English E, the small SUV. So now going again 1 on 10, I can set the cruise control. I also have this distance showing me in the middle of the screen and also in the head-up department. Suspension-wise, it is quite firm. Again, similar with the Evoque. They have changed the rear axle of the vehicle, so it's basically the Discovery Sport or Evoque or even the old Freelander platform. Just the rear axle is changed and taken from XF, XE and F-PACE. But you don't feel that much. Essentially, it drives like a Range Rover Evoque. Just can say that. If you have experience with that vehicle, then you know it. If not, well, it has some unique driving feeling indeed. It's really hard to say because some other smaller SUVs, they feel a little bit lighter, and it might also be the visual part that everything is pretty thick in here, what you're looking at. So it drives lighter than the F-PACE, although it's not really much lighter in the weight due to the steel chassis, but it feels definitely a little bit lighter. But then again, if you compare it to other SUVs in this segment, then it rather makes a little bulky impression also when driving it. As long as there are not so many potholes in the roads, it's okay from the suspension. You rather got this firm, sporty ride. When you have some bumps in the road, you definitely feel that. So you have to just decide which is more important to you. Steering-wise, the first party feels a little bit dead, and then the steering input that comes after that feels a little bit arcade-like. So it's not essentially a real natural driving feeling. As I said earlier, it's a little bit different when you are in the dynamic mode, but the difference is not that huge, and it also doesn't change the whole characteristic of the steering. A lot of different features remind you of the F-Type, told you that earlier. And so while driving, that gives you again another sportier note, and especially if you're used to the F-Type, or maybe have a nice vehicle setup with the F-Type as a sports vehicle, and this one here maybe as a daily commuter, that could be interesting, and you don't have to get used to a very different car. Also, when not looking at the head-up display, the instruments are also very clear to read while driving. So, I'm more a fan of analog gauges, but those ones are really well to read also, no matter which weather we have here. It's a little bit different than with the central infotainment system, which looks a little bit more matte. And I could very well imagine when the sun would be really shining very hardly, that this one could not be seen that well then as we can at the moment with the cloudy sky. One very interesting thing, by the way, always when driving not in Germany on a motorway, it's actually so relaxed, because when you keep the speed limit or just exceed it by a little margin, which is just then the real figure on GPS, but a little bit more on the tachometer, which are always going a little bit ahead, then you're not getting bullied from behind. If you keep to the speed limit in Germany, you're always getting bullied from behind. That's really interesting. So those are the impressions from the motorway, and even more important, of course, when we get off the motorway now, let's take a tour for a little bit more agile run than in the mountains. Now to a little countryside ride. So when it's getting a little bit more agile, you feel that it's not so good to have, you know, this rather loose feeling in the steering wheel, and that overall accounts for the feeling that you do not feel that safe in the car. However, I can, you know, assure you at least it has a 5-star rating in the Euro NCAP crash test. So should you crash, it's actually on paper a very safe car. That's no problem. But again, for me, it's more this feeling of, do you feel totally connected to the car? Do you feel one with the vehicle? And that makes also a safe, sporty feeling, and that's definitely not the case here. We can also change, again, through the driving modes. With Eco, by the way, the throttle input is reduced, that you can save some more fuel. However, then with Dynamic, again, throttle input does not have the biggest effect than with the shifting stick. Dynamic mode sets all of the other parameters, but actually doesn't make such a big effect. Also not in the suspension. The biggest effect is really when you use the shifting stick. Then you have the sport mode, RPMs go up. You can accelerate a little bit easier. That is making the biggest difference then. However, here also on the corners, again, I don't have the exact feeling of when and where to steer out of the corner again. But at least it's staying quite comfortable during that. Now also a little harsher conditions, but it's very beautiful outside at least. So now pushing it a little bit in the corner. The brakes, by the way, are a little weak. So they should be a little bit tougher. There's also good conditions to test them here now. Should actually brake a little bit better. You have to really apply them pretty firmly. Oh, nice. It's the Lac de Saint-Cassien. Very beautiful, even though we cannot see that much. So going back to the D mode, when you don't have the chance, then you just, you know, roll a little bit relaxed. And that's actually quite good with this vehicle. Well, it's not that it's not, you know, not fun at all, this car to drive, but also doesn't push you so much that you would want to drive it a little sportier. So what we can do, by the way, is, because I don't like following those guys there, the next stop, I will just stop, just for a few seconds, let them drive, and that we can show you some more of the acceleration, maybe also in those lower speed regions. And the one we did initially was actually working pretty well. The all-wheel drive system also is basically front-wheel drive, which is the base model version, plus then also we have the rear axle if you want so the torque is then also applied to the rear wheels. That is all done automatically. Of course, the maximum percentage is 50-50. More than that is not physically possible, even though if some manufacturer press release sometimes say 100% on the rear wheels, that's not physically possible with this kind of all-wheel drive system. So I just turn up in here, and we're free to go soon again. And yeah, my point is that those 100% values are just possible if you think that the other wheels are locked electronically. Then it's basically, let's say, a theoretic value that you have 100% on the other wheels, just because the other ones are break down electronically. So that's, by the way, we change it from reverse to D again. You have to press the shifting lever obviously twice. Is that really true? No, you just have to push it forward or backward longer, then it's working. And that's actually quite good, because you might remember in the Volvo XC40 recently, that was not possible. You always had to go 2 steps, and that's really annoying. So here, when you go all the way reverse, it's working all the way D, then you also jump over the neutral gear. The reverse camera, by the way, looks quite good from the resolution. That's definitely pretty helpful. Now we're getting on it again. Let's go in the sport mode. Good traction. That's a good traction, yeah. So the all-wheel drive system is working pretty well, even when the road is a little bit slipper. I like that, and that's also, of course, a good customer value then. Well, I did some acceleration stuff here, yes, but we also were on the motorway a little bit longer and just setting cruise control at constant speed. And overall, we have a good representative mix already of the overall consumption. That's not that good. We have 10.5 liters. Maybe sometimes going a little bit higher even. And that's of course too much. If you want to know what's that in mpg, 10.5 liters / 100 kilometers in mpg, then you also find out that this petrol engine will be the most important for this car worldwide, that's for sure. Maybe not in the highest horsepower spec, but the general engine. The horsepower spec will not change anything from the consumption. So it's more about this basic engine. And again, it proves that downsizing the displacement is not good for less consumption. That simply just doesn't work. You just bring the entry price maybe a little bit lower. So my tip then from experience to vehicle, well, power is really good. I know the down that figure, sorry. 6.4 seconds it was to 100 kilometers an hour. And it feels actually quite fast and smooth also with the all-wheel drive. More agile than bigger SUVs. But overall, comparing to other small SUVs, not the sportiest one, as also the old chassis with a lot of weight is being used. Comfort is quite okay, not overwhelming, but also not bad. Quite good from the sound insulation, also when you're just rolling it. And if you know the Range Rover Evoque, yes, driving wise, indeed, it's basically a Jaguar badged Evoque. And now to our conclusion for today. Exterior wise, I think one of the most beautiful smaller SUVs there is, or small compact SUVs. This Ian Killam, design director, design language Jaguar still has, I think is so beautiful, especially, you know, with the whole silhouette with just few design lines. This is also the big strength of this vehicle. The interior, I think design-wise, it's also quite attractive, but the build quality is not what Jaguar should be aiming for. Also, the infotainment software, I think, is not a very intuitive one. Then driving-wise, well, it's not bad, but then again, it has this old platform. It drives basically like a Range Rover Evoque. If you like that, that's fine. If you're more used to the driving feel that past Jaguars has, this one is really something very different. It is somewhat agile and light to drive if you compare it to a bigger SUV, but if you compare it to other competitors in this segment, it rather feels a little bit lazy. The engine also has a lot of power, that's for sure, but the consumption is too high and the power curve is not smooth enough for my, for my thinking. So it really comes first, no, that really hammers in. So it doesn't guarantee you the smoothest driving. So you could easily also go for the less horsepower variant of this car. And that's also my key point. You can very well use this car to get an entry point into Jaguar, entry point into a premium, smaller SUV, and then stay with the low-key versions, about 35,000 euros then, because otherwise it will get too expensive. Top trim, when you put everything in there, 65,000 euros, and then the car is really too expensive for what it delivers. Thank you so much for tuning in today with Autogefühl, and also join us next time.